Did anything? It was a successful.
To Tehran?
Yes.
I have no information. Yeah. Except that the Iranian authorities supported Mr. Kofi Annan's plan. And this is a positive sign, of course, because we need everybody in the area to get committed to Mr. Kofi Annan's plan.
Thank you. Are you, civilians, unarmed civilians have also gone to both Turkey and Lebanon. Are you saying the shooting was against armed groups by Syria? I wasn't clear of your explanation.
Are you referring to the skirmish that took place on the Turkish-Syrian border?
Also in Lebanon, there were some reports, yeah.
There are two different situations.
Right.
Which one you want me to comment on?
Both.
With regard to the incident that took place near the Turkish-Syrian border, an armed group entered the Syrian territory coming from the Turkish territory. An armed group. This armed group opened fire against a police station over there. They were counterattacked first, actually, by the police forces over there, the Syrian police forces over there. They withdrew, then they got back again, and they opened fire again against the Syrian precinct police over there. Of course, the Syrian police members retaliated against the armed groups, and in the exchange of fires, some casualties took place and fall in that incident. Please.
Last week, you mentioned actually those Arab countries because you mentioned Saudi Arabia, Qatar. You even mentioned the President of the General Assembly. They are, you say, undermining the peace process, the 6 points of Mr. Annan. But you mentioned also other countries. I would like you to be more specific. So what are the other countries? I mean, you mentioned also Turkey. But what are the other countries? And I gave you 3 names. Pick one or all of them. United States, France, Great Britain. Are they also included in this group that you say they're undermining the peace process?
The Syrian government sent an official letter to Mr. Kofi Annan on March the 27th, committing itself to his plan, 6-point plan. A couple days later, as you remember, on April the 1st, 71 countries gathered together in Istanbul. Among the attendants were Americans, British, German, Turkish, French, Qatari, Saudi, all those you have made reference to. And rather than supporting the plan of Mr. Kofi Annan in this meeting in Istanbul, the attendants agreed on sending $100 million to the Syrian military opposition based in Turkey as well as elsewhere. That was a very provocative act at the time, emanating from part of the international society which is supposed to work for peace, not for destabilizing Syria and violating the international law rules. These $100 million are about paying the rebels. They call it monthly salaries for mercenaries. Is about devising safe zones, the establishment of safe zones, in order to, as a pretext to the establishment of so-called humanitarian corridors and the humanitarian interference in our domestic affairs. So when you see this paradox between the Syrian government's commitment towards making Mr. Kofi Annan's plan a successful one on the 27th, and a couple days later, a totally contradictory move that took place in Istanbul, you may notice that those who gathered in Istanbul were not careful and keen interest in saving the blood of the Syrian people. On the contrary, they were working to topple the government, to change the Syrian state, and to be part of this geopolitical change in the area. Gentlemen, what's going on in the area is about changing the geopolitics. It's not about Syrian refugees, a couple thousand in Turkey. It's not about the pitiful victims that fall down during the crisis. It's about changing the policies of the Syrian government, the independent political decision of the Syrian government, changing the geopolitics, settling accounts with Syria because of its independent political policies. Some people would like to settle their accounts with Iran through Syria. Some others would like to protect the Israeli settlement policies in the Palestinian occupied territories. Some others would like to prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state. So we have to look at the picture in its entirety, in its comprehensiveness. And the very important point of this discussion is that the Syrian people are paying the price of this political busyness in some Arab countries and some regional countries, as well as international countries. We are really suffering because of that, and we think that this kind of policies are irresponsible and provocative, and they run against any chance of stabilizing the situation and making the mission of Mr. Kofi Annan a successful one.
Mr. Ambassador, is that the group you were referring to when you said that there are some parties that are frustrated about the success of the plan so far? Were you referring to the Friends of Syria and the 71 countries?
Yes, I refer to those countries who attended the meeting in Istanbul and those who called, publicly speaking, for arming the Syrian opposition and for paying the rebels, as well as to provide them with weapons and protection. You know what? People think that terrorism is only about killings, is only about criminal acts. But you may have different kind of terrorism. Syria is a victim of media terrorism. Syria is a victim of political terrorism. Syria is a victim of diplomatic terrorism. And it's really weird and unacceptable to see some officials occupying important posts in the United Nations working in favor of this scenario and these policies. Here I'm referring to the PGA himself, who distorted the rules and procedures, as you know, the other day, who is calling for meetings on Syria while Mr. Kofi Annan is negotiating and discussing with the Syrian government in order to torpedo his mission and to leave negative impacts on his 6 points plan. I'm not referring only to the Qatari PGA, but I am referring also to the Saudi Minister for Foreign Affairs, who publicly said it, that he would like to arm the Syrian opposition, and he pledged actually part of the $100 million promised in Istanbul meeting to destabilize Syria as well as to torpedo the plan of Mr. Kofi Annan. So we have too many evidences certifying the validity of what we are talking about. The Syrian crisis is being used for political business by some countries, and the Syrian government will not allow or tolerate this anymore. Nizar.
على الإرهاب لا شك أن هناك إرهابيين كثيرين جاءوا من السعودية هل ما زلتم تحتفظون بعدد منهم في سوريا؟
لدينا الكثير من القرائن والبراهين التي ستحرج الدول التي رعت الإرهاب في سوريا، ولكن سنكشف عن ذلك في الوقت المناسب. شكرا.
Yeah.